Okay, so as I stated and was stated in the newsletter, this is timekeeping basics. What we plan on looking at during this training session, we'll do kind of a deep dive into the timesheets themselves. Take a look at the pay calculations. That's probably something that not very many of you are familiar with, but I kind of want to highlight that just so that you know how hours are actually calculated in the system. Take a look at shift differentials, and then also take a look at what I consider to be some of the better time and labor reports in the system. Okay, so we'll go ahead, we'll get started with the timesheets themselves. And we're going to take a look at two of the different timesheets because, and I'm only going to feature two because with the release of the new app at the end of last year, there are only two of the timesheets that can actually be used with that new app. The first one is that we'll take a look at briefly is the bulk hours timesheet, which is generally used for salaried employees. So I'm going to take a look at Nicolina's timesheet here. She's one of our salaried employees. And we'll see that for this timesheet here, that each day is a column, and in each time entry, you just put a total number of hours. So, you know, if each day you can have just like 8 hours, right? That's one thing that you can do. If you want a job cost, then you can actually specify maybe on Monday she was at home for 4 hours and then she was at the office for 4 hours. And those are your 8 hours. So we're actually not really concerned with when the hours were specifically worked. We're just concerned with the total number of hours, right? I'm sure that this is familiar to a lot of you, but I just wanted to highlight it again. And then the other timesheet that is also compatible with the new app is called the Start End All Days timesheet. Which looks like this. So each day of the pay period has a couple of rows showing your in time and your out time here, raw total for those two entries, and then your day total underneath that. So let's say that Casey, here, we'll add a row for Monday as well. So you have your button over here to add rows. We'll say that Casey came into work at 8 a.m., took lunch at noon, got back from lunch at 12:30, worked until 5:30. Let's make that 4:30. All right, so you'll see here that each row, we have the raw total of 4 hours for each row, and then a day total for 8 hours underneath that. Now, you'll see the question marks here in the calculated total, because currently we haven't actually saved the timesheet yet for any of the rules on the pay calc profile to actually take effect. So we saved the timesheet, the rules from the pay calculations profile take effect, and now we can see, same total in this case, 4 hours for each block of time for each time entry and 8 hours overall, but it's now filled in instead of showing question marks. So again, this might be a timesheet that some of you are familiar with. Some of you might also be more familiar with what is called the small business timesheet, which doesn't have these actual editable time entry fields. You actually have to click on the day or the time entry set to actually edit those, or click on, where it says the actual day and date to add a new time entry. I know that we have a lot of clients who are on that timesheet, but unfortunately that timesheet isn't compatible with the new app. So if you're looking to use the new app, then we would want to switch you over to this timesheet right here. This is one of them that is compatible. Now, that being said, with the new app, if you do have the small business timesheet, your employees can still punch in and out in the new app. However, if they want to see some actual detail, if they click on the timesheet tab in the new app, it won't actually show them anything because that timesheet isn't compatible. And likewise, managers or admins, wouldn't be able to make edits to their employee's timesheet in the new app because, again, that timesheet isn't actually compatible with the new app. So, just to reiterate, if you're looking to use the new app, what you'll want to do is switch over, let us know, and we will switch you over to this timesheet right here for your hourly employees. All right, so another thing that I wanted to do was kind of jump into each of these other tabs here, because I'm sure you're all familiar with the timesheet tab. That's where all the time is located, right? But I also just wanted to take a deeper dive into the extra pay, calc detail, and summary by day tabs here as well. So we're going to go ahead, we'll start with the extra pay tab. And basically what the extra pay tab is used for in the timesheets is something that's not actually really, time related. So this would be more things like you can track bonuses here if you want to. You can track commission amounts here. You can track stipends, tips, reimbursements is another big one. Per diems is something else you might want to track in here, but really anything that would be more of just a flat dollar amount instead of being time. So in this case, we would just choose our pay category, choose the amount that the employee would be getting paid, and save it, and just save it like that. If you want to tie it to a specific day, you can. That might be better for something like a stipend, something like a per diem. But it wouldn't necessarily have to be filled out. You can just default to the first day of the pay period. So that is the extra pay tab. The pay categories for extra pay are set up very similarly to the the various pay categories in your timesheet. So, your regular, your overtime, whatnot. So if you do need some of those set up, just let us know and we can do that for you rather quickly. All right, so next up here is our Calc Detail tab. So Calc Detail tab has a lot of information. It can, when you're first looking at it, it can be a little overwhelming to look at to begin with, but I think it has a lot of good information. So taking a look at our time entries that we just created here, you'll see we start with the date on the left. And then from there, we have raw from and raw to. And basically what that means is these are the actual times that the employee punched in and out that day. So, Casey punched in at 8, punched out at lunch at noon, punched back in at 12:30, punched out at 4:30. So those are the actual punches. In this case, you'll see these red E's. That means that these entries were manually edited, which, of course, I just put those in. Casey wasn't actually punching in and out, so that's why we see those red E's. So then right beside that, again, we have our raw total, 4 hours for each time entry pair. If the employee has a schedule set up and assigned to him, that would show up here. In this case, Casey does not, so it says not applicable. And then after that, it shows the pay category for these hours. In this case, this is the beginning of the pay period. Casey hasn't reached overtime yet. It's not time off, so these are just regular hours. After that, we're going to see our calculated from and to. And this is basically, these are a couple of important things about the calculated from and to. These are the hours that the employee will be paid for. And these are also the times after any rules are applied. So if you have any rounding rules, these times could differ from your raw times because punches are being rounded. In this case, you'll see here that the system has marked that half hour between noon and 12:30 as Casey's unpaid lunch. So we actually have an additional entry here that's from noon to 12:30. That's for unpaid lunch, even though everything else remains kind of the same here, because in our calculated total, we have 4 hours for each pair once again. Let's see, I don't recall if our demo company has any rounding set up. Let me, okay, it does. So let's take a look at that now. So we'll say that instead of clocking in right at 8, Casey clocked in at 7:55. Well, we have rounding set up in our demo company here. So it took that punch of 7:55 and rounded it up to 8. In this case, she clocked out at 4:35. Well, it took that punch of 4:35, rounded it down to 4:30. So we can see these are the actual punches that Casey did. Here's the time that she's going to be paid for after the rounding rules are put into effect. Finally, you'll see well, we have a couple of other columns in here. We have a weekly running total, and we have a pay period running total. Now, for our demo company, the pay period running total is going to be the same as the weekly running total because the actual pay period for the demo company is a week. So it's not going to ever differ. But for those of you folks that have bi-weekly, semi-monthly, or monthly pay periods, then this pay period running total is actually can actually be pretty helpful. Time off column here will show you if any of this time is time off. In this case, unpaid breaks or lunches are considered time off because the employee is not actually working. But also, if you have vacation, sick time, PTO, that will show up here under the time off column. Finally, if you have a rate table turned on, you're tracking rates through the timesheets, which can be done, you'll have the rates show up in this last column on the right. Underneath that, if we're tracking any extra pay, you'll see that it actually shows up underneath all the time information. So here we have our $100 stipend being listed for Casey. And that is the calc detail page. After that, we're going to look here at the summary by day page. Summary by day is a little bit, doesn't contain as much information, is a little bit easier to read, and just kind of gives you, just kind of what you really need to know. So in this case, for Monday, Casey had 8 regular hours and so far 8 hours for the pay period. That's what we're seeing here. It will actually give a column for every pay category that you have. So if Casey were to end the week and have overtime or maybe some vacation time, there'd be a separate column for those, and your calc total is going to add everything up for you, so that you or the employee can know how many hours they have for the week or for the pay period. And then finally, again, we also have a column for our stipend. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to kind of show here in the timesheet itself is not here on the page. We actually have to click on this utilities button. And once it loads up here, we're going to take a look at timesheet changes. So basically what the timesheet changes report is just kind of an audit trail for this employee-specific timesheet. So it'll show here in the time entry date the actual day that's being changed for the employee. So in this case, I was changing Monday the 14th, right? But when that change was being made was just a couple of minutes ago on today, the 17th. You'll see here the actual change that was made. So this first one here is, the time entry I created from 8 to noon. The second one is the 12:30 to 4:30. And then we can see that I changed, these two correspond with the change from when I made the change from 8 to 7:55. And then these two correspond to the change I made from 4:30 to 4:35. Nice thing about this report is not only can you see what's changed, but if you scroll over here to the left, you'll also see who the user was that made this change. So if it was actually the employee punching in and out, it would have the employee's first name and last name here, along with their employee ID. It tells you when they logged in to make that change, and that also that also holds true for any managers or admins that make changes as well. It'll show their name on here too. Now, if you have time clocks, and it's a punch coming from the time clock, I believe that it also says system administrator. So if you see system administrator, that means that it is either someone here at Axiom who made that change, or it was one of your time clocks. Another nice thing you can see, it shows the user's IP address. So that can be one way to confirm. If you're wondering if you don't have IP restrictions to your punching and you want to, verify that the employee, made the change from your network, you can always verify IP address from this report as well. So this is a really useful report. Like I said, this is specific to Casey's timesheet. You can view this for any timesheet in the system. And if you come to, let's see, my report system, system utilities and all punches, that would show you for the entire company. That one can be a little hard to parse through just because there's always, a ton of information in that one. But that is for the entire company, whereas this one here is specific to the employee. All right. So now let's take a quick look at the pay calculations that are driving the time calculation for Casey's timesheet. So from here, I'm going to click on info. We're going to go into our pay calc profile right here. So we're just going to take a look at a couple of these rules just to kind of give you an idea of how this is done in the system. So first, taking a look, I guess we only really have a couple of rules to look at anyway. So we're telling the system here to find all breaks and lunches. So it's actually going to be looking for breaks in the employee's time to see if they're taking a break or a lunch. Now, this next rule is saying that if the employee works more than 6 hours and they do not punch out for lunch, we're going to automatically take a half an hour lunch out for that employee. A lot of people like this rule because it means that the employees, it's one thing, it's a lot easier to remember to punch in the morning and punch out when you go home at the end of the day. But punching out for lunch can be missed pretty easily. So this is one way that, we can make sure that the employee's lunchtime is added to their timesheet. Here is our rounding rule, which this rounding rule is saying that we're going to round their very first in for the day and their very last out for the day. We're going to round it to the nearest quarter hour, the nearest 15 minutes. And after 7.5 minutes, we're going to round up. So that basically means, so let's say that Casey's shift starts at 8, right? If she clocked in at 8:07 and 30 seconds, it's going to round her up to 8:30 or 8:15. I'm sorry, 8:15. So 8:07, 30 seconds, rounds up to 8:15. Anything under that, so 8:07, 8:06, 8:05, is going to round back down to 8 o'clock even. There are a number of different ways we can round. This is usually the most popular, up after 7.5 minutes, because it's split right down the middle, and it's fair to the employee, fair to the employer. There are also a lot of people that do, up after 8 minutes, and usually the Department of Labor doesn't really, their only rule is that as long as you're fair to the employee, so either, in this case, up after 7.5 is fair to everybody, up after 8 gives the employee a little bit more leeway. So as long as you're being fair to the employee, that's really what they're concerned about. All right, so finally, we're going to take a look here at our overtime rule. In this case, our demo company only has weekly overtime. So we're saying that, looks like the system decided to get slow on me here. Basically what we're saying here is that any hours worked over 40 is going to be considered overtime, and that our week starts on Sunday and ends on Saturday. So that means that when the system is determining, what hours are considered part of a week, it's going to start with hours worked on Sunday and end with hours worked on Saturday. So any 40 hours between the Sunday start and the Saturday end would be your regular, and anything over 40 is going to be your overtime. Our second part of the rule here considers what hours are counted towards overtime. So we're considering all of our worked time entries, but we're saying here we're listing our time off entries that count towards overtime, and we don't actually have anything listed. That means none of our time off entries are counting for overtime. It's just going to be worked hours. Finally, we're saying here in the third part that the overtime is going to be the last time entries. So that means that, you know, your first 40 hours are going to be your regular time, and then anything after that is going to be the overtime. And that kind of gives you an idea of how the pay calculations work. The next thing that I kind of wanted to talk about, we'll start here with the pay calculations, is actually shift differentials. So there are two ways that we can actually set up shift differentials in the system. One way is here in the pay calculations profile. So you'll see if I come up here to add step, and this will actually show all of the rules that can be added for the pay calculations profile. And when we get close to the bottom here, you'll see that there are actually a number for shift premiums or shift differentials. So the most typical ones that we use here in the pay calculations would be a shift premium based on day of the week and time of day. So in this one, we can say, you know, maybe if you have like a weekend shift differential, you can say that starting at Saturday on 6 a.m., you know, going to, I'll say Sunday at 11:59 p.m., we're going to have a specific shift premium, okay? Or maybe you have something that would be starting on Monday night, let's say 10 p.m., going until Tuesday morning, say 5 a.m. Maybe that's your third shift, okay? So this is one way. So then when the employee clocks in, if they clock in between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. Monday to Tuesday, then the system's going to know that that's actually part of this shift that they're supposed to get a premium or differential for. There are other rules, as I'm sure you saw as I was scrolling down the page, that can be added for shift premiums, but this is typically the most used one. Now, another way that we can actually do shift premiums, and actually a considerably easier way, would be if we actually come to the employee's information and then we scroll down here to their pay information box, and you'll see here under pay information we have this default shift premium drop down box. If this is an employee who's always working third shift, you can select that from this box. You can save their information, and then on their timesheet, it's always going to pull in that shift premium for them. Now, if you have employees who work, you know, different shifts here and there, they're not always going to be second or third shift, then you probably wouldn't want to do this. This situation doesn't come in handy too often, but it is an option. Okay, so we're starting to get a little short on time here. I'm just going to, at this point, show some of the pages in the system that I like to use for some of my favorite reporting. I'm actually going to start with either the manage timesheets by pay period or current, because you can actually, if you come here and you do select columns, there's a whole bunch of columns you can bring into these pages, including it defaults to raw hours, right? We saw the difference between raw and calculated, but you can actually bring in the calculated hours columns so you can look at those instead. So there are so many columns that you can bring into this report, into this page right here, just current timesheets or even timesheets by pay period. So for previous pay periods or what have you. where you can turn this page into a lot of different timekeeping reports just by itself. It's a really, I mean, it starts with a really nice setup to begin with, kind of like your typical spreadsheet. So it can really be rather useful. Some of the other ones that I really like, if we look under time allocation, of course, here's our time off calendars. Time off calendar, just the basic one, starts by year. Then we have by month and by week. Of course, on each one, there is, in the yearly view, you can click on the month to jump into the month. And then once you're in the month, you can always click on, there's these buttons up here to jump into by week or by year. Of course, you can always click on the magnifying glass to jump into a weekly view as well. And you can click on the day to view a specific day. You can also show pending approval. If you check off the box for pending approval, and those will show bolded in the same day. It'll just be, rather than being this light gray, it'll be black and bolded, so you can tell the difference between what's been approved already and what's pending approval. Another good report, if you have exceptions turned on, so when someone's like late or tardy or absent, maybe they clocked in early or clocked in late. The late, early, absent report's a really good one, because this will actually show you. Now, I have to preface this by saying that you have to have schedules set up in the system in order for this report to work. So if you don't have schedules, it's not going to work, but it's going to actually show you the employee's scheduled time in and scheduled time out, and their scheduled total hours for the day. And then after the day is over, it'll show you their actual time in, their actual time out. If they were late, it'll show you how much they were late here. If they were early, it'll show you the same thing, and those are both for ins. If they clock out late or clock out early, same thing there. Total number of hours they actually worked for that day. If they were off, it'll show time off hours. If they were scheduled but they didn't make it in, it'll tell you that here. If they weren't scheduled but they did work, it'll tell you that here. And finally, if you have any missing punches, it'll tell you if you have incomplete time entries in the final column. There's more that can be added to this, but I think this is a really great report as it's set up to begin with. The final report I wanted to highlight under time allocation is the all timesheet notes. So if you have employees or managers or admins who are keeping track of notes, either by day or by time entry, you will find those all here. It'll tell you, the employee that has the note. It'll tell you the date for the note, the type of note, whether it's a day or a time entry, and then the actual note itself. All right, so finally, I just wanted to take a look at a couple of the calculated time reports that I think are pretty useful. The first is calculated time summary. So this one's nice because basically shows for every employee in the, the dates that you're looking for, it gives you a total of, it shows total number of hours, and then it will show a total for each pay category type. Now, the one thing that can be kind of tricky about this report is it will show the time offs here, but generally these are the actual, for some reason it likes to default work hours for the time offs, but these aren't, those aren't work hours, right? Those are time off hours. So usually you have to edit the report so that it shows calculated time off hours instead. So if we were to say calculate time off hours by vacation, I think we'll see something here for Casey. Yeah, there we go. So while this vacation column doesn't show anything because those are work hours and vacation hours aren't work, if we pull in the calculated time off hours, it will actually show those. But this is another great report that can be used to show you just the total number of hours for employees over a period of time, whether you're looking for a pay period, a quarter, or a year. This is a great report just for totals. Finally, if we take another look At calculated time, here we have our detailed calculated time report. And this one is just, this one is very similar to your calculated time summary page on a timesheet, except that this can be shown, for multiple employees at the same time rather than just one employee. And another nice thing about this report is that unlike the calculated time summary on the timesheet, right, we can actually bring in more columns to this report. So whereas we can't really edit, we can edit some of the stuff on the timesheet itself, what you see there, but we don't have nearly the ability to add stuff to that as we do on here. So those are really just, some of the reports that I find to be the most useful in the system. It doesn't look like we got any questions, so that's all I had planned for the day. It looks like we're pretty close to our 1:30 time, just a couple of minutes over. As always, if you have any follow-up questions about this, feel free to shoot me an email, give me a call. If you need to, if you want to go back and review this training session, it will be up on YouTube, in our YouTube channel by the end of the week. If you want to get to our YouTube channel, any of us that email you from Axiom, we now have a little YouTube logo in our signature. You can just click on that. It'll take you directly to our YouTube channel where you can view any and all of these training sessions that we are now offering. So yeah, you can go there. If you miss one, you can go there to view those as well. So I thank you all for your time today, and I hope you have a very good rest of your day.